Madeline Carter's heels clicked nervously against the marble floor as she stepped into the glass atrium of the Langford estate, clutching her second-hand clutch like it might disappear. She hadn't been invited to the luxury charity brunch she was working at. "Place the champagne flutes on the left tray," her supervisor snapped, brushing past her. "And keep your back straight." Madeline nodded quickly, adjusting her black apron and glancing once more at the sprawling room filled with gold-accented tables, towering floral centerpieces, and servers in crisp white. Outside the terrace windows, a string quartet played beneath a silk tent, and millionaires mingled in designer clothes with practiced smiles. She didn't belong here, not really. But rent was due, her student loans weren't going to pay themselves, and this temp catering gig was better than nothing. She inhaled and walked forward with a tray of mimosas, careful not to make eye contact with anyone too long. That was when she saw him. He stood near the window, tall and sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit, an expensive watch glinting on his wrist as he nodded politely to a couple speaking to him. His hair was dark, tousled just enough to look careless, and his jaw tight like someone who didn't enjoy smiling for show. But then he glanced away from the conversation and his eyes, gray-blue, intense, landed directly on her. Madeline looked down quickly and turned toward another table, cheeks burning. Why was a man like that even looking at her? "Excuse me," a deep voice said behind her. She froze. Turning slowly, she found herself face to face with him. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Broad shoulders, clean-shaven, and so distractingly handsome it made her forget what she was supposed to be doing. "You dropped this," he said, holding out the silver pin from her apron. She hadn't even noticed it had fallen. "Oh, thank you," Madeline said, grabbing it. "I didn't realize." "You don't work here often, do you?" he asked, studying her. Madeline blinked. "No, just today. I'm between things." He tilted his head like he was genuinely curious. "What kind of things?" She hesitated. "I'm a graphic designer, freelance, trying to get steady work." He smiled a little, and it softened his whole face. "You have that look, like someone who doesn't quite belong here but refuses to shrink." Madeline blinked again. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It is," he said. "I'm Roman Jackson." Her heart skipped. That name sounded familiar, and then it hit her, Roman Jackson, the billionaire tech investor who donated the new wing at the Children's Hospital. The man who built an entire homeless shelter in downtown LA last year, the man hosting this brunch. "Oh," she said, voice catching. "You're the donor," he nodded. "I like to see where the money goes and who shows up when it does." "I'm just a server," she said quickly, flustered. "No," he said, "you're not just anything." Before she could respond, her supervisor's voice cut through the air. "Carter, move." Madeline gave Roman a small apologetic smile and hurried away. The rest of the brunch was a blur. She kept her eyes down, feeling his gaze on her more than once. She told herself she was imagining it. Men like him didn't notice women like her, but when the event ended and she was helping stack trays in the back, she heard someone say, "Someone's asking for you." She turned and Roman was there. He didn't look out of place among the silver trays and plastic containers. He looked like he owned the building, which, honestly, he might. "I wanted to say goodbye," he said. Madeline laughed nervously. "Goodbye, and to ask if you'd have lunch with me," he added, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Lunch," she repeated, stunned. "Like, not here," he smiled. "Definitely not here." "I don't really do lunch dates with billionaires," she said, half joking. "I don't usually ask," he said. She stared at him. "Why me?" Roman met her eyes. "You were the only person here who didn't pretend to be someone they're not. That's rare." Madeline hesitated. "This couldn't be real. I don't have anything to wear." "I'll send a car," he said. "And I'll take care of the rest." She opened her mouth to say no, but instead she heard herself say, "Okay." The next day, a sleek black car waited outside her apartment. She wore the only decent dress she owned, and when she stepped into the restaurant 5 stars overlooking the ocean, Roman was already there, waiting, a table set with white roses and a view of the waves. "You came," he said, standing up. "I almost didn't," Madeline admitted. "I'm glad you did." Lunch turned into hours. They talked about everything: her small apartment, his childhood in Montana before the money, her dream to design book covers, his exhaustion with endless boardrooms and fake smiles. He laughed when she told him she once spilled coffee on a bride's dress during a wedding she was working. He leaned in when she talked about colors and fonts like they were magic. He watched her like she mattered. It was crazy. It didn't make sense, but it felt real. And when he walked her back to the car, he paused. "I know this is fast," Roman said quietly, "but I want to see you again, not just fancy lunches. I want to know you." Madeline's heart beat wildly. "Okay," he smiled. "Good. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since yesterday." And as the car pulled away, she sat back against the seat, breathless, wondering how in the world she'd gone from serving champagne to falling for the man who funded it all. Madeline stood frozen in the middle of the rooftop garden, unsure where to place her hands. Roman had invited her to a gallery opening, something quiet, he'd said, and then casually rerouted the driver halfway through to somewhere better. That somewhere turned out to be a private rooftop in West Hollywood, where the chef knew Roman by name and the view stretched from the glittering skyline to the dark curve of the Pacific. He leaned against the edge of the stone balustrade, sleeves rolled up, a glass of something amber in his hand. The breeze tugged at his shirt, and the golden lighting from the lanterns flickered across his face, catching angles that made Madeline's throat tighten. "You're quiet," Roman said, not looking at her. "I'm still trying to figure out if this is a dream," she replied, glancing at the white-gloved waiter who just delivered oysters on a tray shaped like a mirrored wave. "Why, because of the food?" he asked, half teasing. "Because of—" "All of it," she said, "because you could be anywhere with anyone." He finally turned. "I don't want anyone else." She crossed her arms, not out of defiance but from the sudden chill that wasn't caused by wind. "You don't know me. I know you aren't impressed by status. You didn't try to flatter me when we met. You weren't afraid to challenge me at lunch when I said I wanted to leave my company." Madeline blinked. "You remember that?" "I remember everything you say." That silenced her, not because she didn't believe him, but because it made her stomach twist in a way that wasn't unpleasant. He stepped closer, placing his glass down on the stone ledge. "Can I ask you something personal?" She nodded once. "Why do you always look like you're waiting for the floor to drop out?" Madeline's breath caught and she looked away. "Because it usually does." Roman didn't speak for a moment, then quietly said, "Tell me what that means." She didn't want to. But something in his voice made it impossible to shut down. "My mom passed away when I was 17, she said. "My dad left when I was 10, so it was just me and my younger sister. I worked through college, took whatever job I could. I stopped expecting good things to last." Roman's jaw tightened, but not out of pity. It was something else, like rage at the idea that the world had made her feel that way. "Where's your sister now?" he asked. "She got a scholarship," Madeline said. "She's studying environmental law in Vermont. I pay what I can toward her rent. It's not much, but it's something." Roman looked at her like she was a puzzle he'd half solved and was desperate to finish. "You're stronger than anyone I know." "You barely know me," she said again, but softer this time. "Then let me," he replied, stepping closer. "Let me know everything." Her voice wavered. "What if I want to keep parts of me separate from this?" Roman didn't flinch. "Then I'll wait until you're ready to share them." The waiter reappeared and cleared the untouched tray. Roman requested dessert he didn't ask, just told them to bring something with real chocolate and no gold flakes. Madeline laughed in spite of herself. "You don't like gold flakes. They taste like money." "Not flavor." She watched the way he moved, so relaxed in a setting most people would kill to see once in a lifetime. But beneath the ease, there was something restless in him, something that didn't quite belong to this world either. "What about you?" she asked. "What are you keeping separate?" He hesitated, as if calculating the weight of his answer. "I lost someone too," he said. "Not to death, but to ambition. My fiancée left me 2 years ago, said she didn't sign up for a man who cared more about foundation grants than Fashion Week." Madeline blinked. "She left you for being too generous." "She left me because I stopped playing the part," he said. "And I realized I'd spent 6 years building a life that never actually fit me." Madeline stared at him, the pieces falling into place. So you stopped building for other people. I started rebuilding for myself, he said. Problem is, sometimes I wonder if I'm allowed to want anything real anymore. You are, she said without thinking. He looked at her and something in his eyes flickered surprise maybe, or hope. The dessert arrived, a delicate tower of dark chocolate mousse with a raspberry glaze. Roman didn't touch it, neither did she. Instead, he leaned in and said, "Come with me to Milan." Madeline blinked. "What?" "There's a design summit. My company's launching a new initiative for young creatives. I want you to see it. You'll love the architecture there. The color theory lectures alone would make you cry." "I can't just fly to Milan," she said, stunned. "Why not?" "I have work," she said. "Deadlines, clients who don't care if I'm sketching under a cathedral ceiling. I'll cover the trip. You won't owe me anything, but I want you to see what the world can look like when someone believes in you." Madeline stared at him, torn between disbelief and the ache to say yes. "You barely know me," she said again, this time not as a protest but a warning. Roman's voice dropped. "Then let me spend every hour in Milan learning." She swallowed hard. "I'll think about it," he nodded once. "That's all I ask." As the car drove her home later that night, Madeline stared out the window, heart racing, not because she was falling for a billionaire, but because for the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for the floor to drop. She was waiting to fly. Madeline stepped off the private jet and into a world she'd only glimpsed in magazines. The tarmac outside Milan's Linate airport buzzed with luxury vehicles and uniformed drivers, but Roman's car was already waiting, sleek, matte black, with a driver who greeted her by name and took her bag with a respectful nod. When she climbed in, Roman was already seated inside, dressed in a charcoal coat and a dark sweater that made his eyes look even sharper beneath the dim cabin light. He didn't ask if she'd changed her mind. He already knew. She'd said yes 2 days ago, heart racing, after spending a night sketching in her bedroom with every doubt in her head screaming louder than the last. "Sleep on the flight?" he asked, voice low. "Not a second," she said. "I was too busy trying to wrap my head around this." He smiled, not the kind that asked for attention, but the kind meant only for her. "You'll adjust." The ride into the city was quiet but not awkward. The windows revealed a skyline scattered with spires, balconies, and terracotta rooftops. Milan was a living painting, and Madeline couldn't stop staring. Their hotel was a converted palazzo tucked between ivy-covered walls and wrought iron gates. A concierge greeted Roman by name, handed him a key card fashioned like a gold coin, and offered to send up espresso. He declined it smoothly and turned toward her. "I booked 2 adjoining suites," he said. "You have your own space, but if you need anything, I'll knock," she finished. "Thank you." Her suite was unlike anything she'd ever seen. High ceilings with hand-painted frescoes. Marble floors softened by Persian rugs. A balcony that overlooked a courtyard filled with lemon trees and fountains that sounded like laughter. That night, Roman took her to a quiet dinner at a place no tourist would ever find. The waitress greeted him in warm, rapid Italian, and he answered with enough fluency to make Madeline blink. "You speak Italian." "Enough to order without embarrassing myself," he said. "I spent a summer here when I was 24. I was running from something." She set her fork down. "What were you running from?" "My father," he said simply. "He passed away last year. We hadn't spoken in over a decade." She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. "He was a banker," Roman continued. "Structured, controlled. He thought computers were a waste of time. Thought I was wasting my potential. I built my first company just to prove him wrong." "Did it work?" Roman met her gaze. He never admitted it, but I think he knew. The air between them shifted, not heavier, just more real. After dinner, they walked through the Brera district, where the cobblestones glistened from an earlier rain and musicians played near shuttered storefronts. Roman took her hand as naturally as if he'd been doing it for years. The next morning, he brought her to the design summit, a soaring glass building that overlooked the Navigli canals. Inside, the space buzzed with energy. Artists, coders, architects, and students from across Europe shared ideas and prototypes. One installation projected 3D models of forgotten cities. Another used AI to help reconstruct ancient textiles. "I thought you might like this," Roman said, guiding her toward a stall displaying interactive book covers that changed color with touch. Madeline leaned in, barely breathing. "This is brilliant," a young designer approached, explaining their process. Roman stepped back, letting her engage fully, watching her with a quiet pride that made her chest ache. Later, as they sat in the summit's rooftop cafe, she turned to him. "How are you involved in all this?" "I fund the foundation that sponsors the summit," he said. "But I stay out of the creative decisions. I just make sure they can afford to dream." She stared at him for a long moment. "You don't just throw money at problems. You actually care." "I've been on the other side," he said. "I know what it costs to want something you can't afford to reach." That night, they didn't return to the hotel right away. Roman brought her to a hidden courtyard behind an old museum where a single piano stood under a canopy of lights. The place was empty, silent except for the echo of their footsteps. "Wait here," he said, and crossed to the piano. She didn't know he could play. But as his hands moved over the keys, slow and deliberate, the melody soaked into the stone walls like something sacred. When he looked up, she asked, "How long have you been hiding that from me?" "I didn't think it mattered," he said. "Until now." Madeline walked toward him, stopping just beside the bench. "You keep showing me pieces of yourself like puzzle fragments." Roman's voice was quiet. "I'm trying to be someone who deserves you." She didn't realize she was shaking until he reached up and brushed her cheek with the back of his hand. "You already are," she whispered. He stood, but didn't step back. "I want more than a few days in Milan with you." Madeline felt her heartbeat in her throat. "Then what happens when we leave?" "I don't want to go back to pretending the world makes sense without you in it," he said. She laughed, breath catching. "That's not fair." "I know," he said, "but I've spent too long living a life that looked impressive and felt empty." She waited, the silence between them building like a pressure that needed release. "I want to be with you," Roman said. "In whatever way you'll let me." Madeline didn't answer right away. She let the words settle, not just in her mind, but in the places she usually kept guarded. Then quietly she said, "Let's figure it out together." Roman's expression didn't change, but his hand found hers again. This time she didn't let go, and as they walked back through the quiet streets, the world no longer felt like something she was passing through. It felt like something she belonged in, with him. The ornate doors of the Grand Delmer ballroom swung shut behind Madeline, and for a moment, the world was nothing but the hush of velvet curtains and the low hum of anticipation. The annual Langford Foundation Gala was in full swing, filled with the kind of people who wore confidence like cologne and diamonds like they weighed nothing. But this time, she wasn't here to work. She was here with Roman. The hotel had sent a stylist that afternoon. Roman hadn't asked her permission. He'd simply said, "I trust your taste, but I want you to feel like you own the room." And somehow she did. The dress was midnight blue silk, a deep V at the back and a subtle train that whispered over the floor. Her hair had been swept up, a few strands left loose to frame her face, and when she'd stepped into the hotel suite earlier that evening, Roman had gone still. He hadn't said anything right away. Just walked toward her slowly, eyes steady, like she was something he'd never thought he'd be allowed to touch. Now, he led her through the ballroom with the kind of quiet gravity that turned heads. He didn't need to be the loudest man in the room, he was the one everyone already knew. But tonight, he wasn't here to be admired, he was here to stand beside her. "You're sure about this?" she asked under her breath as they passed a cluster of executives near the bar. Roman leaned in, his voice low. "You belong here more than most of them." She exhaled, not from nerves, but from the strange, steady confidence he always seemed to pull from her. He guided her toward the front of the room, where a stage had been set beneath a canopy of white orchids and crystal chandeliers. A woman in a dove-gray suit stepped forward to greet Roman, her smile tight and polished. "Roman, I wasn't sure you were coming." "Wouldn't miss it," he said smoothly. "Claire, this is Madeline Carter." Claire's expression didn't falter, but her gaze swept over Madeline with practiced precision. "Lovely to meet you. Are you in design?" "Graphic," Madeline said without missing a beat. "Mostly editorial. I'm working on a children's literacy campaign right now, illustrations for print and digital." Claire blinked. How impressive! Roman's hand brushed the small of Madeline's back, not possessive, just there, grounding her. She's being modest. Her work is the reason I'm funding that initiative next quarter. Claire's smile tightened further, and she excused herself with a nod. When she was gone, Madeline turned toward him, eyebrows raised. You're funding what? Roman's expression was unreadable for a second. I didn't want to tell you until it was finalized, but your pitch deck, the one you showed me in Milan, I passed it to the board. They approved it, Madeline's breath caught. You submitted it? I told them it was the strongest proposal I'd seen in years, which is true. She stared at him, completely stunned. Roman. I didn't do it for you, he said. I did it because it deserves to exist. But I won't pretend I'm not proud of you. Before she could respond, a voice called out from the stage. Mr. Jackson, Roman turned. A man in a tailored tuxedo gestured toward the microphone. We're ready for you. Madeline looked up at him. You're speaking. I wasn't planning on it. He hesitated, then offered her his hand. But I think I have something to say. She followed him to the edge of the stage, where he gave her fingers a brief squeeze before stepping up and facing the crowd. The room quieted instantly. I wasn't going to give a speech tonight, Roman began, tone calm but clear. But sometimes life gives you reasons to speak even when silence is more comfortable. He glanced toward Madeline just once, then returned to the crowd. This foundation was started in my mother's name. She believed in giving people a chance to rewrite their stories, and it turns out so do I. There was a mild stir among the front tables. Roman continued, but I've learned recently that writing a new story isn't just about funding or strategy, it's about people. People who remind you what it means to care, people who challenge you to be more than your name or your net worth. He paused, then added, some people walk into your life unexpectedly and make you realize you've been standing still for too long. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. I'm grateful to this city, this foundation, and every person who's ever made me rethink what matters. Tonight, I'm not just donating, I'm investing in new voices, in new futures. In the kind of change that doesn't get printed in headlines. He stepped back as the room erupted in applause, but his eyes never left Madeline. Later, after the final toast had been given and the music swelled back into motion, Roman found her again near the terrace doors. The chandeliers cast gold patterns across her skin, and the city lights beyond the glass shimmered like stars fallen to earth. You didn't warn me about public declarations, she said, but her smile betrayed her. I didn't warn myself, he replied. She looked up at him. You meant it, didn't you? All of it. I meant every word, he said, but there's one thing I didn't say. Madeline tilted her head. What's that? Roman took a breath, then reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, and opened it. Inside was a ring, delicate, timeless, with a single sapphire in the center. Madeline froze. I'm not asking you to marry me tonight, he said quickly, voice suddenly rough. But I am asking you to let me keep choosing you, every day. As long as you'll let me, tears welled in her eyes, unbidden. This is fast, she whispered. It's real, he said. She looked at the ring, then at him. I don't care about the ring. I know, that's why I got it, she laughed, a broken sound full of joy. I'm not saying yes to a future I don't understand yet. Roman nodded. Say yes to now. She slipped her hand into his. Then yes. He smiled open, unguarded, and leaned down to kiss her, slow and certain, while the city spun around them. And for the first time in years, Madeline Carter wasn't waiting for the floor to fall away. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The early autumn breeze carried the scent of sea salt and jasmine through the open French doors, rustling the silk curtains of the Amalfi Villa Roman had rented for the week. Morning sunlight spilled across the terracotta tiles, warming the floor beneath Madeline's bare feet as she stood on the balcony, sketchbook in hand, eyes sweeping the coastline below. The cliffs dropped dramatically into cerulean waves, and pastel houses clung to stone like something from a dream. Roman came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin brushing her shoulder. You've barely touched your coffee, he murmured. Too distracted, she said, flipping a page. The light here changes everything. He kissed the back of her neck. Everything's changed, hasn't it? Madeline turned slightly to look at him, her face framed by wind-tossed strands, in ways I didn't expect. Roman brushed her hair back, his expression unreadable. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you. But I wanted to wait until we were far from cameras, calendars, and people who think they know us." She closed her sketchbook slowly. "What is it?" "I want to take the foundation in a new direction," he said, "not just grants and scholarships. I want to build something that lasts, a creative residency. A place for people like you to design, write, invent, somewhere they can breathe without worrying about rent or deadlines." Madeline's brows lifted. "Like a retreat, more permanent," he said. "I already bought the land in Tuscany. There's an old monastery on it, half ruins, but the bones are good. I want you to help me shape it. You're serious." "I want you to co-direct it with me," he said. "Curate the artists, design the space, set the tone. It won't just have my name on it, it'll have yours." Her breath caught. "Why me?" "Because you see people," Roman said. "And you don't just create, you make others believe they can too." She looked down at the sea, heart thudding. "And you're ready to leave the rest behind." "I've already stepped away from the board," he said. "I've kept the holdings that matter, but I'm done living by quarterly earnings. I want something that feeds the soul, not just the headlines." Madeline turned to face him fully, searching his eyes. "And us? What happens when the glamour fades? When it's just long nights and grant proposals and paint stains on the floors?" Roman's smile was slow, certain. "Then I'll be exactly where I want to be." She touched his face gently. "I think I love you more now than when you made a whole city applaud you." He leaned in, kissing her temple. "That's a relief, because I love you most in the quiet." Later that day, they wandered the cobbled streets of Ravello, hand in hand, stopping for lemon gelato and a ceramic dish Madeline insisted they'd use for olives once they had a proper kitchen again. Tourists passed them without a second glance, and Roman looked genuinely at peace for the first time in years. As the sun set over the Mediterranean, they returned to the villa, where Roman lit candles along the stone pathway and uncorked a bottle of wine that had been aging longer than she'd been out of college. They sat beneath the pergola, wine glasses in hand, and he reached into the pocket of his linen shirt. "I've been carrying this since Milan," he said, placing the sapphire ring on the table between them. "You said not yet, but I was wondering if maybe now is the time." Madeline stared at the ring, heart pounding. "You're really doing this?" "I'm not asking for a fairy tale," Roman said. "I'm asking for a life, one we build, with messy days and beautiful ones, with gallery walls and garden weeds and rooms full of light and music. I want all of that. With you." Madeline reached for the ring, her fingers brushing his. "Then yes." Roman exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They didn't rush inside to call anyone. They didn't post a photo. They simply sat there, fingers intertwined, letting the sky darken around them, the stars above quietly celebrating what the world hadn't yet seen. 6 months later, the grounds of the old monastery bloomed with wild lavender and fresh plaster. The modern studio wings had floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed beams. Artists painted along the stone walls. Writers held readings under olive trees. And in the converted chapel-turned-gallery, Madeline curated the first exhibition, a blend of sculpture, digital design, and children's illustrations from underrepresented schools across Europe. She stood outside the gallery doors, clipboard in hand, watching as the first guests arrived. Roman stepped beside her, his tailored coat open, sleeves rolled to the elbows. "Your lighting adjustments were perfect," he said. "I learned from the best," she replied, then added, "I still don't know how you convinced the zoning board to approve the modern extension." "I told them it was your idea," he said. "They liked you more than me," she laughed, the sound catching on the breeze. "You really are impossible." "I'm yours," he said simply. A group of scholarship recipients ran up to her, eager to show her their sketches. Roman stepped aside, watching her with quiet awe as she knelt beside the children, listening intently, offering encouragement, her passion radiating like sunlight. Later that night, after the final candle had burned low and the last guest had departed, Roman found her sitting on the mosaic bench in the courtyard barefoot, a shawl draped around her shoulders. He sat beside her, pulling her close. "This is what happy looks like," she whispered. Roman kissed her hand, the one with the sapphire ring. "This is what forever looks like." And under a moonlit sky in the hills of Tuscany, with laughter still echoing faintly through the olive groves and the scent of paint, citrus, and rosemary in the air, they began the rest of their life together in love and exactly where they were meant to be.